Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. With us now from Washington, D.C. is the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. Congressman, it's great to have you with us.
Good to be with you, John.
All right, well, most of the media attention this week has been focused on the Supreme Court, but the Republican Study Committee also made some pretty big news with their announcement. The RSC released a plan to balance the budget in 5 years, the Cut, Cap, and Balance Plan. That's what we're talking about here. Now, Senator Harry Reid has already said the Senate will not pass a budget this year. So what do you hope to accomplish with your plan?
Well, first of all, Senator Reid, it's been almost 3 years that they have not done what the Constitution tells them they're supposed to do, what the law tells them, I should say, they're supposed to do, which is pass a budget. So we're going to show what we think makes sense, what we think will get our country to balance, what will put us on a fiscal path that's actually sustainable. And that's what our Cut, Cap, and Balance budget, in fact, does. It will balance in 5 years. It holds discretionary spending constant for that time frame, something a lot of families have had to do. And it would also put in pro-growth tax policy. One thing we definitely need is we need a growing economy. So we think we got the right policies, the right spending levels in this proposal, and we're doing what families and small business owners all across this country have had to do.
Well, House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan also recently released his budget blueprint. What is the biggest difference between Ryan's Path to Prosperity plan and the RSC's Cut, Cap, and Balance plan?
No, real simple. Why Paul's budget has some good policy ideas and is certainly 1,000 times better than the president's budget. Paul Ryan's budget takes 28 years to balance. Ours balances in 5 years. I think if you ask the average American out there, do you think it's appropriate when we got a debt of $16 trillion, a debt that's now bigger than our economy, do you think it's appropriate to take 28 years to actually get to balance before you ever begin to pay down that debt? Or do you think we should do it a lot sooner, like 5 years, as we do in our budget? And so that's the biggest difference, is that we actually get to balance much faster. Think about this. If you get to balance in 5 years, then you can begin to pay down that $16 trillion debt. If it takes 28 years to get there, while you're getting to that balance point, you're still adding to that $16 trillion debt that, as I said, is now bigger than our entire GDP. Bad place to be, and that's why we think you got to get there much sooner.
Well, given the lack of any kind of agreement between the House and the Senate, would you agree that the most likely scenario for 2013 would be for Congress to pass some sort of continuing resolution this fall in place of a budget to keep the lights on in Washington? Yeah,
unfortunately, that's probably what's going to happen, because as we started here, Harry Reid he's just not going to pass a budget. And so that's the unfortunate situation we're in. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't show, particularly in an election year, what needs to be done to actually solve the problem. And that's what we do with our budget. Here's the other thing I would add, John. Our budget is the only one. Last November, 261 members of the House of Representatives voted for a balanced budget requirement to the Constitution. If, in fact, that were the case, and we had that requirement in our Constitution, our budget is the only one that would comply with that requirement, because we would get to balance in a short enough period of time, because it'll take a while to get that constitutional amendment passed by the states and ratified and put into the Constitution. Ours is the only one that complies with that. So if you want to be consistent, members should be supporting the RSC budget, which will be on the floor tomorrow.
I think it's fair to say that a lot of Americans can see that makes sense, having a balanced budget amendment in the Constitution, especially considering the budgetary problems that we face right now. How do you get Democrats on board with that type of plan?
Well, I think you make the case, and ultimately what gets, the old line, what gets politicians' attention is what happens on Election Day. And so we make the case this year, and then we got a huge election coming up in November, as everyone understands. And what happens then, I think, will influence what members will do next year when we actually have to really begin to fix this problem. So that's how we decide things in America. You have elections. This one is probably, you hear this all the time, but I think it's actually true this time. This is probably the biggest election of our lifetimes. And so that's how you make those decisions. That's how you influence elected officials.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit in conjunction with the continuing resolution. Now, if there is a debate about a possible government shutdown, what impact do you think that will have on the November elections?
Look, no one wants a government shutdown. We understand that that's just not in the best interest of the country. But we do think you have to highlight this issue that we have a debt that is bigger than our entire economy, a debt that's bigger than our GDP. We do think you have to talk straight with the American people and say that, we're now paying interest payments of $230 billion a year. And that is going to increase dramatically over the next 10 years to where in 10 years, interest payments will be bigger than what we currently spend on national defense. And I think you have to bring it down onto a personal level and say, look, it is immoral, it is wrong, it is unfair for one generation to live for the moment, spend for the moment, and send the bill to our kids and our grandkids. That's just wrong. In fact, one of the things that makes our country so special and so great, and I would argue the greatest nation in history, is this simple concept that parents make sacrifices for their kids so that they can have life a little better than they did. And then they in turn do it for their children, and each generation has done it for the next until now. Now, for the first time in American history, we have a generation of Americans living for the moment and saying, oh, that's okay, and we will send the bill to someone else. That is just plain wrong. And we need to make that case and spell out what happens if we don't begin to fix it, that we will, in fact, have a debt crisis, just like Greece, just like Italy, just like these other countries are facing today. That should not happen to the greatest country in the world, and that's what our budget would prevent.
Well, along with the debt and the deficit, there's also another big dark cloud kind of hanging over Washington right now, and I'm talking about the looming end of the Bush tax cuts, which expire at the end of 2012. When do you think Congress will take up that issue?
Well, who knows? It could happen in the lame duck session. It could happen, at the start of the next Congress, next January. But it is certainly a big issue, and we do not want that. If those expire, that will be the largest tax increase in American history. And that would be devastating to our economy, would hurt American families, and something that we're certainly opposed to. Our budget proposal says that the policy should be to reform the tax code, but to do it in a way that's pro-growth and do it in a way that doesn't increase the overall tax burden on families and business owners. That's what our plan entails. That's what our plan spells out. That's what we should do, because that's what will promote economic growth.
Now, do you feel like it's in the interest of both Democrats and Republicans to deal with this continuing resolution and the end of the Bush-era tax cuts sooner than later?
Of course it would be better. Sooner would be better because, one of the things that's hurting our economy right now, I hear this from business owners all the time, is the uncertainty that's out there. They don't know what's coming on health care. Obviously, the Supreme Court's hearing that now. They don't know what's coming on tax policy because these tax cuts are set to expire. So there's all this uncertainty. There's the additional burden of new regulations that this administration, the Obama administration, keeps placing on business owners. So if we could provide some certainty on the tax side, that would certainly help. What we can do, what we should be focusing on, is creating an environment, creating a framework that's conducive for economic growth. Right now, I would argue this administration, with its uncertainty on taxes, with its increasing regulation, with the uncertainty on health care, is doing just the opposite. They're creating uncertainty out there, and they're creating an environment that's not conducive to economic growth. We need to reverse that and show how to do that. We do that in our budget plan.
All right, well, let's switch topics a little bit. You have been the subject of some criticism for some comments about the Solyndra investigation that recently appeared in Environment and Energy Daily. In the article, you said, quote, ultimately, we'll stop it on Election Day, hopefully, and bringing attention to these things helps voters and citizens of the country make that kind of decision that I hope helps them evaluate who they are going to vote for in November. What specifically did you mean by that statement?
No, that's how we do things in America. I mean, look, this is the Oversight Committee. You're supposed to provide oversight, look at what government's doing so the American people can see. Now, if there's criminal wrongdoing, then that course will play out. But if it's just bad decisions, incompetent decisions that were being made, which is exactly the case at the Department of Energy, if that's going on, we should highlight that and show that, because that's important for the American people to understand how their tax dollars were used. In this specific case, 27 companies got taxpayer money, 27 energy companies, green energy companies, and this is wind, solar, these type of companies. 27 companies got your tax dollars in loan guarantee. 23 of those 27, according to Fitch and Standard & Poor's, had junk ratings. So no private, they're double B minus, no private investment dollars would go there, but somehow it was okay to use taxpayer money to invest in these junk rated companies. 23 out of 27. 8 of those 23 companies had people on the board or closely connected with those companies who were either fundraisers for Obama or in the Obama administration. So when I asked Director Chu, I said, either you're helping your friends or you're incompetent, or both. That's an important message for the American people to see, that this administration is engaging in this kind of activity. That's what we highlighted, and we think that's entirely appropriate. In fact, exactly what the Oversight Committee is supposed to do.
All right, very good. Congressman Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, thanks so much for being with us here at Newsmax TV today.
Good to be with you today.